Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back for the first time of the year. It's on the Contrary, Awesemo.com's flagship weekly show, breaking down everything for the week one of the NFL season. I'm Dave Loughran on the Twitters at Loughy_D, joined by Alex Baker. As always, just cut to straight Alex here because I want to introduce our guest afterwards since he's a longtime friend of ours, Jordan. What is going on, Alex? We're running it back another year, Saturday afternoon, making things happen. Oh, you already screwed it up.
Yeah, this is exciting, man. This show is in particular is a lot of fun because anyone can tell you like who the best plays are. But it takes some real heart to take some stands that are against the rest of the industry, and that's what we're here to do.
And joining us, did it last year, longtime friend of Awesemo, and good stuff happening for this man. He's moving out to the East Coast, going to be close to me. Got a baby on the way, and now he's the VP of content at Edge Sports and the host of the Splash Play podcast, Chris Spags, at Chris Spags on Twitter. What's good, brother?
I'm excited to be here. I told Loughy over DM before this. It's just nice to be back talking about all the plays here with Alex and Loughy one more time. But I miss doing these shows. I've still been watching you guys. Obviously, as I've talked about enough. I always put on Awesemo shows whenever I'm building the lineup. So I'm excited to watch you guys suffer and do shows live. Josh in particular, watch him suffer on Live Before Lock because I get to blissfully make all my lineups with all the Awesemo ownership projections that we know are going to make us so much money in week one.
And you're straight repping the man bun now. I mean, you used to wear the hat. You kind of conceal it behind the money hat, but now we're in business.
I'm a professional now. I don't know if you heard, I have a fancy title. I'm a VP, which I think sounds more important than I've ever felt in my life. But I just feel like I have to, start mixing it up a little bit more. But I'm sure I'll be back to being a bum and a hat and a hoodie the second that I feel comfortable at all.
Yeah, listen, I'm not wearing a hat today, but I just came from a funeral, and it's like funerals and weddings are really the only times I don't have a hat on. And weddings, it's optional.
You can wear like a black fedora, perhaps. If you wanted to.
Alex, rocking the Trubisky jersey?
Yeah, I'm having trouble like moving on to this new era with the Chicago Bears.
I saw this thing. I'd never seen it before, where he breaks out the MVP, the Nickelodeon valuable player, right? In a game that they got crushed and the fan voted him. It made me really like Mitch Trubisky a lot. But yeah, in Buffalo now, probably not seeing the field whatsoever, but we got a ton to dive into. We're happy to have all of you guys with us as always. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about the show, tell your friends about Awesemo and all of that good stuff. And hey, help us get that sub count up to 60K. It'll be a wonderful accomplishment. Thanks to all of you guys. All right, let's dive straight into it. Alex, I'll kick it off with you. A little bit of strategy talk here, and then we'll get into the games. We'll get into players. We'll hit on our top fades and our top pivots at the end of the show. And of course, our top bets and props as we do every week here on the Contrary. But the question mainly that needs to be asked and answered by you guys is, how are you approaching week one with so much uncertainty? Like, do you have a different approach than other weeks, just not knowing so much going into this? Or do you just follow the same approach that you always do and not get too cute?
Yeah, I think there is some uncertainty. Like sometimes like teams throw us curveballs. Like week one a few years ago, Tariq Cohen, like he wasn't even supposed to play, and then he like blew up the slate. So it's always good to have some contrarian plays kind of on your radar in week one, but there is a lot more certainty than uncertainty because we know most of the fantasy relevant players. We've been rostering them for years, and we know how they stack up. We've been researching season long all summer. So I think we should have a pretty good idea of what to do here.
So Spags, allow me to segue into our first game while keeping this same thing in mind. If we're talking about, say, the Eagles and the Falcons, I feel like this is one of those games that has a ton of potential upside, but also real uncertainty. And like Alex said, we do know who the fantasy producers should be. There's no doubt about that. And what players should be good eventually at some point. But when you look at this game, 48.5 point total, actually a little bit lower than I anticipated it being. You have a very weird scenario, 49 now, where Kyle Pitts could be amazing, but who knows what we get from Devontae Smith, cheap player, both of them around that same mid 4K range. Who knows what you're getting out of that? Who knows if the offensive line for the Eagles, now healthy, just signed Jordan Mailata to a huge extension, is going to hold up? They should. And what is Jalen Hurts going to look like? What is Rager going to look like? What is Russell Gage going to look like? This game to me, just from an overall contrarian standpoint in some spots, is really fascinating.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. This game to me was one that I'm surprised to see it didn't get over the 50-point total. And there really aren't a lot on the books out there that got above 50 this week, which is surprising given what we just saw on Thursday. Two teams that seem to be really taking to heart that the pass is going to be more valuable than the run. But this game in particular, you have a lot of ownership projected from Awesemo to go to Kyle Pitts, to go to Calvin Ridley, who's been pretty high up. There's a lot of guys here that I think are interesting. And Mike Davis, if anybody did watch Splash Play over the last summer, I've been debating with Pete, and I guess, the industry has sort of made that debate too with Mike Davis, where loved this guy last year. Now the Falcons, clearly gave a lot of work to Todd Gurley last year, have Arthur Smith coming in, and he has shown an ability to sort of use play action efficiently, to use running backs and really lean on them. So I'm a believer in Mike Davis too, but in this spot, the company that I'm working for now, Edge Sports, the whole thing they do is they're running simulations, 100,000 simulations, and trying to find line of inefficiencies there. They have the line as being a 45-point line. So that's even more scary to me, where if you are going heavy here and you're also end up overexposed to some guys the field's not going to be with, like, are you going to be left holding the bag? And I think it's a legitimate question, but I still tend to think there's going to be a lot of opportunity here just because these defenses were so bad last year, and they both are pretty qualified offenses too.
That's the thing. Like, if the Eagles, Alex, have that bolstered offensive line, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a very good team this year, but I think you're going to get some games. And I think the same can be said for Atlanta when you've got Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley and Pitts and Gage, and as Spags pointed out, Mike Davis as well. It's a weird spot because they're not getting a ton of ownership. Pitts and Ridley are, but then you've got Gage at 1%. You've got Devonta Smith at like 4%. Jalen Hurts not pulling a ton. Matt Ryan not pulling a ton. Like, how do you approach a game like this in large field tournaments?
Yeah, I think this one's really interesting because Hurts runs the ball so much. In games he started last year, the Eagles had a neutral rate rushing of 50%. So that was really high. That's going to make it a lot harder for pass catchers to get there. So I'm looking at the other side of this game with Matt Ryan. Like Atlanta, they've been one of the most pass-heavy teams for years. And you take away Julio Jones, that means Ridley. He's got the highest receiving props in the league. He's going to be a really standout option. And then you kind of have Kyle Pitts coming in, one of the most heralded rookie tight ends of all time, probably. And then Russell Gage as well has been fantastic when players have been out in past years. So I think you got some really good receiving options, and they love to pass the ball. So I'm in on it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, who is your run back? And I know it's going to vary, of course. It seems you like Atlanta a lot more. Who do you come back with? Do you come back with Smith? Do you go back with like Dallas Goedert? I mean, who would your guy be coming back on this game in the event that it turns out being a shootout?
No, I don't think you always need a run back. And this is a great example of why, is because I feel like if Jalen Hurts individually has a really big game, then obviously you can't pick two QBs. So Matt Ryan and Jalen Hurts have if Jalen Hurts has the big game, then you're not going to need the run back. So I'm not really going to force it in there.
What about you, Spags? Are you cool going straight Atlanta stack with nothing coming on the other side? Or is this a spot where you're trying to get a decent piece of each of them?
I mean, honestly, the Awesemo projection for Devonta Smith worries me here that we have them, or I'm saying we. I'm still going to say we, guys. You have to deal with it. But no, you guys have it as a under 10, which is terrifying to me because I love Devonta Smith coming out of college. I did think, the numbers really bore out that he was making plays happen. He was making Mac Jones look like the best version of Mac Jones. And I think that's something that, Patriots fans will see. They don't have Devonta Smith in the house right now. A guy who was really great after the catch. He was also great at creating separation. So I really do believe in Devonta Smith, but I agree that there is some risk here because Jalen Hurts, we saw last year, he does have a lot of rushing equity, does have a lot of rushing TD equity. I think that's something that can be problematic where, maybe Devonta Smith does have a nice day, but if he doesn't get, 2 touchdowns, you could be really in a spot that's not going to be great, even if the Atlanta stack goes off. So I like Smith the most. I think Rager, can take that jump in year 2, but really didn't show a lot last year. I think in this spot, Devonta Smith is the most obvious one, and maybe Miles Sanders not far behind. But as Loughy, I'm sure knows, it's kind of a crowded backfield now, and it does seem like maybe the Eagles not going to rely on Miles Sanders as much as they did last year.
I'm still unsold on that. I still think that Miles Sanders is the clear lead back, but I'm open to being wrong. I mean, it does not open to it. If it happens, it happens. But I think Gainwell probably gets some third down where I still anticipate Sanders being that guy. And if the preseason told us anything, he didn't play at all, which generally speaking in a spot like that, especially where your front office is telling your coach not to play your starters in the preseason, to Devontae Smith too. Last thing I'll say on this, and we'll move on to, there's another game that is wildly appealing to me, but everything you talked about Mac Jones is spot on. But what about the fact that he was out producing guys like Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs, who were all first round picks at Alabama?
I think it speaks to the talent here. Like Devonta Smith, I know the knock on him is the size and all of that, but I do think when you have numbers like him, like as some people may know here from the Awesemo shows, I aggressively color code everything on my data sheets just so I know when I'm doing a show or just even for myself to know like what's good, what's bad, and be able to scan it quickly. And for the data for college, like for all the receivers, Devonta Smith was all green for me, like leading every single category across the board. And I think that does matter to me. Like I think those things do translate over, just having the performance, especially, in the SEC that we all know, even if you're not a follower of college football, if you're not paying attention to everything Matt Kajeski says, which you should be, I would say you'll know the SEC is basically, NFL level competition or about as close as you can get to it. So I believe in Devonta Smith. I think too, he's the kind of back or the kind of receiver that should work well with Jalen Hurts, just being able to have Hurts throw the ball somewhere and let Devonta Smith make the most of it. So I'm a believer here. And I think there's a chance that, the projections may be low coming in. And then this could be the cheapest we see him if he is even remotely competent.
Yeah. Method Man said, Method Main Johnson. I don't know. It says, I'm not getting notifications for this. I've been subscribed for years. And yes, I hit that bell. First of all, hit the bell and hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. But second of all, YouTube has this thing where if you release a certain amount of videos on the channel, only I think like 3 of them get notifications per day. So I believe this is our 4th one. It's unfortunate. I mean, should save notifications for On the Contrary. Am I right?
Yeah. The most important notification you could get on any given week, I would say.
That's what I'm saying. Right. That and the Splash Play pod.
Yeah, those 2 and nothing else out there. Just those 2.
Alex, one game that I'm in love with this week, and this will probably be very seldom am I in a spot where it's like, man, if this game goes poorly, I'm in trouble. Cause I try and spread it out enough. The Titans at Arizona game just on every front seems so appealing. I mean, Arizona defensively, their secondary, I don't see any way, unless they have guys come out of nowhere. I don't see any way the secondary is going to be even remotely competent this season. Tennessee is a concentrated offense, which you have to love, a good offense. And I'll give you this and toss it over to you. I saw the stat the other day. I mentioned it on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel the other day. If you're playing season long, follow us, hit us up, check our waiver videos out, all of our in-season live streams. Tannehill started 26 games over the last 2 years with the Titans, 26, which have gone 21-4-1 to the over. That's a nuts statistic right there. 21-4-1 to the over in 26 starts. Last year, 13 of 16 games went north of 50 points. 7 of 16 went 60 above total points, and they had 4 games of 70 plus. So this has been a Tennessee team that has been known to have some legitimate shootouts and high scoring games. What the hell are we doing with the Titans and the Cardinals tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that this game is pretty appealing for sure. Tennessee, because they have such a concentrated offense, like you were saying, it's very fantasy friendly. So we know Derrick Henry, he's always an amazing option. AJ Brown and Julio, very solid, but quite expensive. So I think with Tennessee kind of having a lean towards being a run first team, I'm kind of wondering how much there's going to be to go around between Brown and Julio. So they're not huge priorities this week for me. But the matchup, you got to like from both Arizona not having a great defense, and then also they're able to put up some points.
Spags, I'm on the other side of this one a little bit, just because Julio, I agree the prices are up there a little bit, but Julio is getting not a lot of ownership. And while I do think that Henry is obviously going to get a lot of work, my overall philosophy here, again, could be wrong, we're not even at week 1 yet, or Sunday, is that you don't bring, you don't bring Julio Jones in if you don't intend on using him. And that's kind of what I'm going with heading into this week.
I would say Julio Jones to me strikes, they did use Davis a lot more, Corey Davis in that, in that second wide receiver role, a little more than I think people realized last year. And I think if you just ported over those touches, maybe added, one more target per game to Julio, you're probably about right where you should be. Julio had 7.3 targets on the Falcons per game last year. So if he gets that in Tennessee, I think that's a pretty decent number. I think the spot, it does jump out because it's one of only 2 games on the main slate that's over 50 points in the over under from all the books out there. So that's something that I think, there's only one other game with Cleveland and Kansas City that hits that mark. So I get why people would want to go here. I think too, there are some numbers. Tennessee was kind of quietly, as I think the reasons you mentioned, Loughy, in terms of hitting the overs, they were quietly a team where if you game stacked them a lot last year, you probably had pretty good results and
crushed.
Football Outsiders DVOA numbers is something I'm trying to incorporate more because it is sort of a reflection overall. It's not the volume-based stats that you would look at when you're projecting with an Awesemo projection, but it is sort of a good signifier. And they gave up 25% more production according to DVOA in the past game last year. And they did make some additions. I know from some of our smarter guys at the company I'm working at now, talking about Bud Dupree and all that, and how that should shore some things up. But that's still like you got a lot to close there if you're giving up 25% more production. So I think it's live here. I just think the question is sort of, I think what Alex is sort of saying is that, who do you pinpoint here who's going to get the production? Because even for the Cardinals, like Kyler Murray is going to run so much. You also have AJ Green in the mix. And if he's not completely washed up, he's going to cut a little bit off of Hopkins, going to cut a good amount off of Kirk as well. Like, where do you go here? Chase Edmonds getting kind of scooped by James Conner potentially. It's risky, but I do think that there is something here, just a matter of, what's your risk profile and who you're going to target.
Yeah. And they are kind of hard to stack. I mean, I've looked at like Tannehill, Jones, Brown stacks, and it's expensive. It gets tough. What about on the other side with Hopkins? Spags already touched on it a bit, Alex, but you've got Hopkins, and then you kind of just have this combination of wide receivers where you just like throw your hands up. You're like Christian Kirk, is it AJ Green? Is it rookie Rondell Moore? What type of involvement in the passing game is Chase Edmonds going to have? What about James Conner? Will he be the goal line back? This is kind of a strange team outside of DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of question marks. One guy I'm kind of willing to take a chance on is Chase Edmonds. He had a big workload when Kenyon Drake was out last year, but it was really interesting because he was known as the receiving back, but when Drake was out, he switched and was not receiving any passes. So it'll be really interesting to see how the workload shakes out this week between Edmonds and Conner. I don't feel like the Cardinals are as committed to Conner as people think because his contract this year was pretty cheap. So it's not like they put a lot of eggs in that basket. So I am thinking that Chase Edmonds has the potential to have a bigger workload than people are expecting.
Yeah. Where do you stand on Edmonds this week, Spags? Because I think this is one guy I don't mind hearing both of your opinions on, just for the sake of time. But yeah, Edmonds is just someone, it's kind of weird. He has one career goal line carry, but he's going to get the passing down work if this turns into a game where they start throwing to the running backs a lot. Are you on him at his price point?
I think he's interesting to get some exposure to. I'm still going to, my process is going to be the same thing I had as I talked about some with NBA down the stretch where I'm just, creating a bunch of lineups, sorting through the Awesemo ownership projections and going from there. So we'll see how that lands and, how the projection kind of works in that favor. But conceptually, I do like Edmonds a lot. I think part of my fear, and this is just, the tortured DFS player that's been doing this for enough years now, but James Conner last year killed me so many times. I was like, oh, he's in a great spot on the Steelers. And then they just never gave him the goal line touches or take him out and Benny Snell would come in or McFarland would come in, whatever would be the case. So now it would be logical that of course he goes to the Cardinals and then they just completely ruin Chase Edmonds and then go give James Conner too many touches and he scoops just enough to make Edmonds, a little bit useless or close to useless. And I think that's my fear here, but that's just, my sort of neuroticism. I think Edmonds is a really strong play on a per play basis. He was really strong. As Alex mentioned, the pass game work was really there, getting over 4 targets per game and could stand to see a little bit more. So I think he's worth taking some flyers, but he wouldn't be like a core play for me. If you're giving him 20% Chase Edmonds, I think that's way too much risk.
Okay. Yeah. Wait, hold on a second. Did I hear you right? His ownership's not crazy, but
no. But if you were like, let me double the field on Chase Edmonds, I think that's a huge risk profile.
Yeah, especially you have no idea what his. I know we're just assuming he's going to be the the 3 down back, and maybe he will be, but I'm not just totally convinced that he is the definitive guy there. And Kyler Murray rushed for 12 touchdowns last year, 11 touchdowns, something crazy. So I have some reservations about that. I also have some reservations about Pitt and Buffalo, but Alex, I know this is actually one game you wanted to hit on specifically on the Steelers side. They are 6.5-point dogs, 48.5-point total. Do you see this as being a game where they're going to need to throw, or could this be a spot where you're looking to get to Najee Harris?
Yeah, Pittsburgh was my favorite team to stack last year, and it really paid off that game. They got eliminated, so that ended up being a killer week for me. But the reason I kept stacking them up is because they just throw the ball at a high rate. It doesn't matter if they're winning or losing. And I think that is going to be called into question a little bit now that they invested a lot more into the running back position with Najee Harris. So that's going to be a little bit of a wait and see for me if they're going to be quite as good a stack as they were last year. But the guys, I mean, Claypool had a fantastic rookie season. He didn't have as much playing time last year, which leads me to believe there's room for him to play more and be even better in fantasy than he was. And then Deontay Johnson, he had a rough year last year by real football standards with all the drops, but he had so many targets in fantasy. So I haven't heard any reason to believe his role has changed. So I think he'll be very solid this year in fantasy.
Spags, do you worry about these outside matchups or these matchups for the outside receivers like Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson?
I worry about the overall construction. I do think Pittsburgh is pretty live, and I think they might be one of my favorite money line bets this week because everybody's sort of anointing Buffalo with, they were good last year. And as anybody who's followed the channel for the last few years knows, I love Josh Allen as much as anybody besides my unborn son. So I very much get that. But I think there is a little bit of an overhype portion of things there. And the one thing that Josh Allen has always struggled with is the pressure part, where his QB rating does fall off the cliff. And Pittsburgh is going to blitz 40% of the time. That's what they did last year. And that was over a very large sample size. So I think the spot for me, that's sort of the concern, is that you see Josh Allen wilt. This offense for Pittsburgh is also being built to what Ben wants. So he's going to be under center more. He's not going to be running play action, I guess, which is kind of stupid given that's going to make everything more efficient, but that's just what he likes to do. So I think you're going to see a lot of low A dot throws. I think Pittsburgh is going to probably try to squeeze the clock as much as possible. So I think there's a lot of things here that to me scream not a great fantasy game. And I could be totally wrong here, but I just think to me, Buffalo, I just so many hype and so many people that I don't think are that sharp going Buffalo, they're going to beat the Chiefs. And it's they're good. Diggs is fantastic. They did a lot of great things, but there's some regression I think that has to come for Buffalo just because they were so out of pocket last year. And now it's you sort of have to regress to what you actually are to some degree.
What about Diggs on the other side of this game, right? Because on one hand, he's spectacular. He has the ability to win weeks, but he's also been wildly consistent, seen a very high target share, led the league in targets last season, led the league in receptions, led the league in yards. The only thing he didn't lead was touchdowns. And he still had, I think, 8 or 9, so it wasn't all that bad. But he was also towards the top in red zone targets. So he really checks off all the boxes. But Pittsburgh was, according to Football Outsiders, ranked number 1 in pass defense DVOA this year. They're likely going to be good again. But it feels like, Alex, that's baked into Diggs' price point already because he is much cheaper than he should be in any quality matchup.
I think Diggs is a fantastic play this week, particularly on DraftKings. He's one of the top fantasy players in the league. And then you look at guys like CMC who have almost a 10K price point. So I feel like the optimal strategy this week is going for these high-end wide receivers instead of high-end running backs. And I don't know if that many people will be doing that because there's a lot of FOMO that happens if you don't put Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook in your lineup. When you look at Buffalo's roster, besides Diggs, they have Sanders, Beasley, and Davis. No one that's really going to threaten Diggs for targets at all. So I think he's about as solid as they come. And one other thing I'll mention is that Buffalo does have some bad weather towards the end of the season. So they may be even better at the start of the season than their stats from last year would indicate.
All right. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned it yet. 2 things. 1, follow Alex at Awesemo DFS. I mentioned my own, and then I just forgot to mention your guys. Follow Spags at Chris Spags. Follow Awesemo at Awesemo_com and me at Loughy _D. But while you're at it, I was just looking at the pinned tweet. The promo code DAC is still going through the 13th, okay? Which means that for $1 single, our Awesemo Plus NFL Express Pass, which includes more than it's like on steroids from what it was last year. It's the Barry Bonds of express passes. This thing is incredible. Not only do you get ownership and projections for all of the single game and showdown slates, but also for the tier slates now. You got a lot of main slate stuff too. You get a version of the lineup builder. And if you're a season-long player, you get the waiver wire tool. You get the start sit rankings. You get the rest of season projections and more stuff that I can't even remember. But yes, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, man who's won several $1 million playing DFS. Built. I know you hate hearing this, but I got to do it. I mean, I made a lot of money playing DFS. Built these tools, uses these tools with the help from other guys that have done quite well for themselves in the DFS space as well. But well, here's what I'm saying. It's $1. You don't like it? You don't like it. I think you will like it for sure. And the tools that we're offering, and this is more than we've ever offered in an express pass. Even when you're not getting it at the promotional rate, it's a bargain. For $1, use the promo code DAK, like the quarterback, DAK. Go to awesemo.com/promos. Check it out. Once again, $1. I mean, with the inflation right now, $1, you could wipe your ass with it, right? So head over, check it out. We'll see you over there. And the premium Slack chat as well. If you have any questions, hit me up Twitter or DMs. They are open. I'm happy to answer any questions before you splurge. Anyway,
and if they have their credit card out too, maybe go to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe, because I hear Loughy's quoting some DVOA stats. All the cool kids are doing it, so it's also pretty cheap. I don't know. Maybe just pair it all together and you'll be a better DFS player by tomorrow. That much I can sort of assure you.
Just a straight bundle over here. Yeah, I love the DVOA metrics, man. I do. The football, the pace stats, they got some good stuff. But yeah, awesemo.com/promos. Use the promo code DAK. All right. Alex, let me head over to you on this one. There are a couple of games where there's spots, like I said, that I just assume I'm going to have a good amount of. I haven't crunched lineups yet, but Raheem Mostert in this game where they're now 9.5 points, 9.5 point favorites against the Detroit Lions. I did a show a month ago on our Awesemo odds channel, which you should check out. We just crossed 1,000 subs, so I appreciate you guys for that. And I was like, hey, get on this at 6.5. Just hammer it. I don't care if they're on the road. We've moved to 9.5 now, quite heavy movement over the past week. And Alex, I think it should. I don't know how Detroit is going to score on offense. And I don't know how they're going to stop the 49ers either through the air or on the ground, where they've got all of these good run blocking linemen back, and you have Raheem Mostert healthy. I just think this is a recipe for them to blow the doors off. It's my favorite survivor pick. I love Raheem Mostert. I just all in all, it feels like the matchup where the Niners can just rout them easily.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a possibility. San Francisco is a very run-heavy team, and Raheem Mostert, he's really only contending with Trey Sermon for carries at the start of the season, since some of their other guys that they liked, like Jeff Wilson, got injured. So I think with the rookie running back, Trey Sermon, he's kind of hyped up for fantasy season long, because people are thinking as the year goes along, he's going to get more and more of the work. But I don't think we're going to see that in game one. So I think Raheem Mostert is a great play, particularly on FanDuel, where he's dirt cheap. And then I think there is some potential that okay, so we have Jimmy Garoppolo starting at the start of the year. That's going to be better for guys like George Kittle, Samuel, and Ayuk. So I think that those guys are firmly in play.
CERN says it's a recipe to destroy survivor picks, but it will be one of mine at least. Yeah, look, dude, I get it when it's a heavy favorite like that, but I just don't think there's a better pick on the week. Spags, I've done a lot of shows throughout this week leading into week one, and Matt Kajeski and Eric Lindquist are not with me when it comes to Raheem Mostert. Alex and Matt Savoca are. So we got some smart people on both sides of the coin here. I did find it interesting, though, that his rushing attempts prop is 14.5, and it's juiced pretty heavy to the over as well. So I think he gets a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I like the spot overall for San Francisco. I think the one thing that does scare me is that there's a pretty big discrepancy between the Edge Sports line. Again, that's the company I'm working for that's doing 100,000 simulations. They have it at a -2 compared to -9. So that kind of big discrepancy. Yeah, like it's I don't know what it is. I know there's some stuff with them because they factor DVOA into it. So it might be like the Lions made some additions that should, because like if you have league average players coming in, it does sort of like, help the water find its depth of that stuff. So it's all stuff I'm trying to understand more to help to get the 4D chess level of DFS that I'm sure will crush me me to rather than using Awesemo projections. Basically, I would say for me that gives me a little more hope though for a game stack where maybe then if the game is more competitive, that you can see a little more production coming from the Lions. Tyrell Williams clearly seems to be a wide receiver one, and I think maybe you don't go full game stack, but maybe if you have Mostert, you do put in one Lions receiver into that mix, or even DeAndre Swift. I think there's something here to it. The guy that I like the most though is Brandon Ayuk. I think he was a beast last year, and this might be a hot take, but I feel like Deebo Samuel is just kind of a gimmick guy who's been doing the Percy Harvin role, only 2.2 air yards per target last year. There's the first mention out there for the YouTube chat, so feel free to drink away. But I do think Deebo is just not that guy, whereas Ayuk showed to me a lot of potential on a per snap basis, had the touchdown equity, was doing it with really crappy QB play around him. So I think Ayuk being the one that kind of breaks out here at a low price, it wouldn't shock me. I know we're not doing the picks for the Millie Maker and all that yet, but I think if Ayuk were in the Millie Maker, it wouldn't shock me one bit.
Yeah, Alex, I was actually thinking about the same thing. I threw it in the run sheet because like Mostert's going to get ownership, not an insane amount, but a decent amount, right? He'll be semi-popular. Kittle's around 10%. I'm talking DraftKings here. And then Deebo and Brandon Ayuk are at 4%. Is there an argument to be made that, you know what, everyone likes Mostert, Kittle's going to be relatively popular, but these two receivers in the same exact matchup, what if they go off? How do you feel about that at their current ownership?
For sure. I think that's something that's worth betting on. And Detroit had one of the worst pass defenses in the league last year. So when San Francisco does pass, they should be able to have a good amount of success. So I feel like there's a lot of potential with those guys. They are quite expensive on DraftKings. So there's a big opportunity cost, but I think that as a millionaire maker play, that could be the ticket.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Give props to Loughy's barber. Thanks, man. Solid fade, a new barber. I thought he did a pretty good job. Brought it down to the skin here. And I'm happy with it. I haven't found a good barber since I lived 50 minutes from here 7 years ago. So it's nice to find somebody that can actually cut hair, but that's not what you guys are here for.
That's what I'm here for.
Are you?
I was just making my NBA 2K22 or maybe 2K22. I guess that's a better way to say it. Right before we did the show, and like you could define the amount of fade he has, and I feel like Loughy, like you're right there with the NBA 2K22 designers where they are. They're ready for it. Yeah.
This guy was telling me all he does is play video games when he's not cutting hair. So maybe he's just taking inspiration from
that's like his lookbook is just going through the My Player on NBA 2K.
What do you think of this? That's awesome. Alex, how are we stacking Cleveland and Kansas City? Very basic question. I'm just going to let you talk, but the reason I ask is because they're all so expensive.
Yeah, totally. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd want Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill, but that just isn't a very good way to build a DFS lineup because you don't have enough money left to really do much with the rest of it. So your lineup's going to look very similar to other people. So that's not a stack I feel like I'm going to be targeting a ton this week. But the game situation is fantastic because obviously Kansas City is a great offense, and that means Cleveland's going to have to pass the ball a lot more than normal to keep in the game here. And they got some intriguing players like Landry and Beckham to target. I'm just a little bit worried that this game is going to be one of the most popular to stack up this week. So since this is on the contrary, I feel even more averse to doing that.
I hear you. One thing that stood out to me though, Spags, and Alex, I know you saw it because you run these. The Chiefs have a 21.7% top stack probability in the top stack tool, which is absurd on a 13-game slate. It's just nuts. Our top stack tool, check it out at awesemo.com, along with ownership and projections and boom busts and everything else. But 21.7%. And then Mahomes ownership popping right now around like 7.5%. And I just can't help but think, or I guess he came up a little bit on the ownership, around 10%. But how much of this is like, do we have to look to secondary or tertiary options? Like, do we have to look to Hardman or like a Byron Pringle in order to make these stacks work, Spags, in order to get like a full game stack here?
I think so. The way they get different to me is to go with Cleveland squeezing the air out of the ball in the first half and the Chiefs having to come back. I love Nick Chubb in the spot. I think that's sort of the move to me is you go with Chubb. You could take your chalky Chiefs stack. You could throw in whatever the chalk values, the Marquez Callaways of the world. And I think that's one that's a little bit different. You're getting the ownership product down, but you're still sort of taking, this stack that's clearly, again, 2 games over 50 fantasy point or over 50 in the over under. And this is one of those 53.5 on the books right now. The edge line also at 53. So to me, that's not one that's different. So that's another good cosign for how I'm trying to approach this year. But this spot's, it is obvious, but I think it's obvious for a pretty good reason. So you can afford the stack if you can, sort of get that value plays in. If you want to play your Tyler Croft, or if you want to switch into Hardman, you're going to save some money too. But I think there are ways to get here, and just taking any part of Cleveland, it seems like, is the move, given that not a single player on the Awesemo ownership projections is over 6% projected ownership right now.
Spags, everyone who knows me watching this show knows I'm going to ask this question because I've talked about it ad nauseum all week long. Where are you at on some, because I had season long, I had him as a must start because you start your guys that you draft that high and that are very good. But where are you at on somebody like Nick Chubb? Like what is the probability that we see this game where Cleveland actually does a good time of controlling possession, and in order for Stefanski to try and keep the ball out of Mahomes and Kelsey and Hill's hands, does everything they can to use their biggest advantage in this game, which this is not up for debate. The biggest advantage they have in this game is their offensive line and run blocking against Cleveland's weak defensive line in terms of run defense.
I think leaning heavy on Chubb would be the move. Like, I think that's a strategy we've seen enough teams have, where obviously the Derrick Henry is going to be the most famous example that then the Chiefs sort of figured out the second time they came across it. But still, this spot, I think that's the way you try to win and try to keep the Chiefs just to the limited amount of production that they can get, or the most limited amount they can get, is just by squeezing the air out of the ball. And Chubb, I know this from when digging deep to find any good Mike Davis stats to kind of point to and go like, you see, he is good. Nick Chubb was the leader in avoided tackle rate last year. Like, he was breaking tackles at a high level with guys who were very low sample size guys. So like, he was as good as anybody out there. And I think there is a chance for that to be the case. So I agree with you. Like, I think Nick Chubb is live. Obviously there is some risk where if the Chiefs do steamroll him, Nick Chubb is going to be rendered a little bit more useless, and you'll probably see more Kareem Hunt. But I think if you're playing multiple lineups, it's a cheap Millie Maker week, so you can do that. You could definitely, make one lineup with Chubb and sort of go with that game script where Cleveland gets the lead early, then you run it back with the Chiefs pass catchers. Or then there's a build too, where you go Chiefs pass catchers, then run it back with Kareem Hunt and assume that he'll get more pass game work. But I think one of the running backs from Cleveland being in the mix for, something big this week would not be surprising at all.
Alex, any interest in the run game from either side of this one?
Well, I think obviously Chubb is a fantastic fantasy player. He's a little bit expensive, given that Kareem Hunt does take a lot of the passing downs and a decent amount of rushing attempts. And then on Kansas City, I guess I feel pretty lukewarm about it. There's some great running back plays this week, but I do notice on FanDuel, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is 6,800, so that is a very reasonable price. And that seems like maybe a contrarian play if everyone's stacking the game, is you just pick that Kansas City is going to win comfortably and run the ball more than people expect.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not like Edwards-Helaire can't be used as a pass catcher either. So I'm not necessarily suggesting you're stacking him with Mahomes, but that he can produce both on the ground and through the air. So yeah, just some interesting wrinkles in this game. Like, if you're going to win with the stack here, you're either going to have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Spags, but it feels like if you have like the Kelsey and Hill and Mahomes stack, you're going to need to find ways to just hit on some punts, and not just one punt. Like, you're going to need several punts in your lineup to fill it out and make it feasible.
Yeah, one that does jump out too is a punt, which I think is also a pivot to the Marquez Callaway chalk that will probably be pretty heavy everywhere. So you go Donovan Peoples-Jones, about a lot of buzz as the wide receiver 3 in this group. And Odell, I guess, is a chance that he won't go with his recovery from the ACL thing. So maybe there's some pathway there where you're saving money while still going with the stack and the run back or the bring back. But I think that's something that could have appeal. But yeah, like I'm with you. I think you definitely have to find savings somewhere. Because it's week 1, you can sort of find those savings and talk you into these guys. I know Chris Conley was projecting pretty well with Awesemo as well, another guy who's minimum salary. So there are ways to do it. It's just a matter of like, if you do it, you're probably going to be chalkier. You need to find somebody probably under 5% owned to just get the overall ownership product down.
All right. We have about 13 minutes to go here. The Prize Picks live show coming up next with Aton and Emax. So stick around for that. And of course, follow Spags at Chris Spags, our wonderful guest of honor today to kick off the season. Check out all of his works at Edge Sports and Football Outsiders and the Splash Play Pod. See, man, I look out for you, bro.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why you're my bro. Loughy and I, people don't know the love that builds when you're waking up at 6 a.m. to do a show with a man. And that's what me and Loughy had for the NFL season a couple seasons ago.
Absolutely. We had a blast too.
Yeah, it was the most fun show. I mean, obviously there's a lot of fun shows, but in terms of waking up at 6 a.m., the most fun show I could ask for.
Right. The least awful you felt. Yeah. Alex, there are a few games. We're not going to be able to get to everything, but tomorrow you, Ben, and myself will be hitting on literally every single game in depth. We got a 4-hour live stream starting at 9 a.m. Eastern, so be with us for that. But of the games that I'm looking at here, Seattle Indy is kind of intriguing to me just because it's not that popular. Minnesota Cincy, and then Jags Texans, just two bad teams, one terrible offense, and two bad defenses. Which of these do you want to hit on and just kind of talk about your approach and maybe some good stacking options or some contrarian plays?
Well, I think the Jags Houston game is going to be great for fantasy because when you do have two bad teams, it tends to make them both look a little bit better. And with Travis Etienne being ruled out after the salaries were released, I think there's a lot of good values on the Jags. And one that I'm liking a lot is Laviska Shenault. Now, Shenault got targeted a lot when he was on the field last year, but he didn't play every down. He averaged about 70% of snaps. And that was supposed to be the case because Colin Johnson was the preseason like 2 wide receiver guy, but then Colin Johnson got cut. So now I'm back on Shenault being on the field more than he was last year. And with Etienne off injured for the year, I think that there's going to be a lot of targets to go around, and he seems primed for a breakout year.
Spags, of the games we haven't hit on yet, and if you want to go to Jags and Houston, feel free to do that as well. Any spots that you, and we'll talk about Callaway too, I didn't forget about that, but any other games or spots that stand out to you as either just way overvalued right now or just overlooked?
I'm with Alex that I do think the Jacksonville spot is intriguing. James Robinson, I feel like we also have to give the cosign to as a guy who could maybe pick up some of that ATN pass game work that could be good. I guess the one that I'm sort of struggling with, and I know this is one that does pop up if you're running the optimizer with the Awesemo projections, is Tyrod Taylor in Houston. I know it's still the same game, but I'm intrigued by what's going on here. Like, I was a big believer in Brandon Cooks and best ball. And then I was sort of like, oh, is Nico Collins going to cut into him enough? Because Nico's been running as basically the wide receiver 2 on all the snaps that Cooks was out there, at least in a limited preseason amount. And it seems like Collins, just based off the college profile, wasn't that great either. Chris Conley looks like a good value. Like, it feels like Houston's going to have something here just because they're bad enough. I think they've improved the defense to closer to league average, but that's still not going to matter that much. I think in this spot, like Houston, there's something that jumps out to me, and Tyrod under 5% owned as a value play with very easy, cheap stacks. Maybe that's the way you afford some of the best pieces. You could afford your Diggs, you could afford your Tyreek Hill or Kelsey. Like, there's something to this. It's ugly, and you are taking on a risk profile for a team that could just be really bad across the board with hiring a coach who doesn't know what he's doing, and the Deshaun Watson thing. Like, a lot of bad stuff around the Texans that maybe just scare everybody off in a way where you could benefit by just having a little bit.
For sure. Yeah, there's uncertainty there, but these are always those weird games, Alex, where it's like it could be 10-7 or it could be 35-32 because the bad defenses or the bad offenses have to win out. One of them has to win out.
Yeah, definitely. So I think Houston's very interesting. Tyrod Taylor is dirt cheap, and we know he is a great value usually because he runs the ball a good amount. And then the question is, who do we pair him with? Now, Kiki Kuti got cut in the preseason, so that was one guy that was supposed to be a target. Anthony Miller, it seemed like he was going to be out for most of the start of the season, but now there's some rumors that he could even play week 1. So that's pretty surprising. That's going to affect how I handle this team a lot, because if Miller is out, then I think between Chris Conley and Nico Collins, like, they pretty much, one of those guys has to be on the field most of the game. And I feel like Conley gets targeted a lot when he's been on the field for other teams. So he'd be an intriguing target. And then Cooks obviously had a great year last year, and he's a great person to pair up with Tyrod.
They have Amendola now too, right? I think.
Yeah, he was signed like real late though, so I don't know if he's like really gonna be a main piece right away.
Okay.
Thanks. Talk to me about Marquez Callaway, and let's not quite get into all of our pivots yet, because at the end of the show we always close it out with our fades and pivots. And by fades and pivots, it doesn't mean we're fading a guy entirely. Just might be a little bit overowned, and as far as pivots goes, doesn't mean we're taking 100% of them. You get the point. We'll give our top bets and props out too, and hopefully you'll go over to the odds channel and check all of the great betting stuff they've got going on over there with Ben Ross and Matt Kajeski and everybody else. But talk to me about Callaway. This is chalkiest of chalk, very, very inexpensive, and he is the wide receiver 1 in New Orleans right now in a difficult matchup against Green Bay.
The one thing I had going was I thought that playing Traquan Smith is going to be the move, more expensive, not jumping out the same way, bigger bodied guy who has produced in the past, maybe not to level you'd like to see. Now he's on IR too. So I don't know how you get away from Callaway conceptually. Deontay Harris, I think, is the one guy you can go to at a lower price point who's going to be fractionally amount of the ownership. I think Awesemo has him under 2%, whereas Callaway is projected to be over 20%. So that's a really big discrepancy. Callaway's looked good. I think it's hard to argue that. He was good last year too before he got hurt. And then that sort of maybe dampened things, but people will remember the preseason game. I'm just a believer in Jameis. I will never forget that run with the Bucks that a few years ago where he was everything. He was everything to me for that month stretch for him. Justin Watson, Brashad Perriman, the scrubbiest of scrubs were just doing everything.
Right.
That was the most fun
stretch.
Yes. And it was just air yards on top of air yards, 2 more for everybody out there, but 500 air yards a game, just throwing it downfield. Obviously, Sean Payton's not going to go that crazy, but I think that there's some potential for Jameis to still be Jameis and hopefully be the best version of himself. And I think just going to Deontay Harris might be the move, but I don't know how you don't go with the field on Callaway, because he has looked fantastic and he's clearly had a rapport with Jameis in the preseason. And I think that does carry some weight. And I don't know that he's the best chalk in the world, but at this price point with really nobody else to go to, I don't see how you don't at least be with the field on Callaway.
Yeah, Alex, follow up. Where do you land on Callaway? He's projected right now to be the highest owned player on the slate.
Oh, that's pretty crazy, but it makes sense. Now, when they released the salaries, Michael Thomas was supposed to play. Then it turned out he was going to miss the first half of the season. So, and then now we have Traquan Smith on the IR that I don't think is really going to be a huge factor, except just shoring up the playing time for Harris and Callaway. There's really no one else on the roster that will stop those guys from being on the field almost the whole game, and they're min-priced almost. So I think they're both great plays this week. And when the guy's 3,400, it affords you the opportunity to be a little bit more contrarian with the rest of your lineup. So I feel like if I have Callaway, even though he's high owned, I can make up for that with my other players.
Okay. It's time to talk about our fades, our pivots, our top props and bets, all of that good stuff. Before we do, if you guys don't mind, hit that thumbs up. We're close to 100 likes. We got about 28 to go. If you haven't done so yet, greatly appreciated. You would save me the shame of not getting there. And if you're watching this show after the fact, drop us a comment down below. I read all of them. I try to respond to them. We all do, really. What you think? We're right, wrong. We're just awful people, whatever it is. We're used to hearing it. Or if you just want to say what's up, that's cool too. Content's free every day here at Awesemo. And also over at Prize Picks, they've got some pretty awesome stuff going on. I'm actually very excited about this for the football season for a number of reasons. First of all, if you go over there and you haven't signed up yet, you have to use the promo code Awesemo when you do. That's just that simple. Get yourself a deposit bonus. Second off, though, if you haven't taken the Patrick Mahomes over under of 1/2 a yard, I believe, it is 1/2 a yard. Patrick Mahomes over under is at 1/2 a yard right now. You win if you go over a half yard. That's pretty simple. A little week 1 promo happening there. Take advantage of that. But the best part about it is you don't have the sharks. You don't have the optimizers, no mass entry, anything like that. All you have to do is pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players available on the board to go over or under their projected score. So if you correctly pick a 5-player lineup, you can net up to 10x your entry fee. They got baseball, basketball, WNBA, esports, but what we're talking about, what we care about right now is football. But you can mix them together. If you're familiar with all of these other sports and you want to do a 5-pick bet, you can throw NFL in there with MLB, whatever it is. Download the app on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Use the promo code Awesemo to get an instant deposit match up to $100 and a free square that you get that you can combine with your other picks. It's Patrick Mahomes over under, like I said, has been dropped to half a yard. If he throws for at least half a yard, you win. So do it. Check it out. I got a couple picks over there. To score, yes, Raheem Mostert. I like that a lot. And boys, I'm going over on Ryan Tannehill yards at 245.5. I tend to believe that this will be a shootout and that the Arizona Cardinals against a middle of the road defense in Tennessee can get the job done and force them to throw. Spags, talk to me before we get into our top. Let's do our bets first, and then we'll close it with our pivots and fades since we're already in the groove here. Give me your top props, top bet, whatever it is for week 1.
Well, I'll be courageous and say that Patrick Mahomes line on Prize Pick seems pretty good. So I'll say that would be
I might hit it. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be my lock for sure. I think in terms of hitting, I guess props, honestly, I haven't looked this closely enough to props because I've been trying to figure out how to put together a content plan, starting a job 1 week before football season. So that's where my head's been. But I do think for me, the bet that I like, I do think the Lions covering overall is going to be my favorite bet just because that line has gotten egregious. I think we kind of saw with the Cowboys game how that can go. Obviously, the Cowboys are not the Lions offensively in any possible way, but that line was just too high. Like it was two teams that sort of have portended to be very pass heavy and two defenses too that give up a lot of passing. I think the Lions here just covering, buying in on the Dan Campbell bounce, a guy who has been an absolute maniac, but does seem to get something out of his teams, I think is a reasonable one. But I'm with you that I think the Niners take care of that one. But I think the Lions covering, it's just, they're at home. Like they shouldn't be a near 10-point dog at home.
9.5 is a lot at home. I agree, but I think they get slaughtered. But still, garbage time, a lot can happen in garbage time. I'm with you. Alex, what do you got for us, baby?
There's a few I really like. One that I'm kind of keying in on is Marquez Valdez scaling under 39.5 receiving yards. Now, Aaron Rodgers made it a huge point that the team had to trade for Randall Cobb. So that's one more wide receiver that is going to be getting playing time. And then I'm not really sure Marquez Valdez scaling and Allen Lazard. There's the props seem to indicate that Marquez Valdez-Scantling will have twice as many yards as Allen Lazard. I just feel like skill level wise, Allen Lazard is above MVS, and that's the way they've been prioritizing them in past years. So I feel pretty confident that Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he's a boom bust guy already, but 39.5 is a pretty high mark.
I like it. I'm going under 45.5 total rushing plus receiving yards for JD McKissick. And here's why. I know Curtis Samuel's out, but you have a very different looking team now. You have Diami Brown, who they already have been lining up in the slot a lot at practice, going to move him around a ton. So does McKissick lose a lot of those opportunities when last year all you had was Sims, right? Not to mention Ryan Fitzpatrick has never been somebody that frequently targeted his running backs. We saw Alex Smith last year just dump off to JD McKissick. This is also one of the lowest totals on the slate. And I think when healthy, the Chargers defense is going to be very good. I also think that Antonio Gibson will be significantly more involved in the passing game this year than he was last year. All of that combined, I don't mind taking the under, especially in a tough, low-scoring game for JD McKissick. Now, let's close this out before we turn it over to Eitan and Emac for the live Prize Pick show, which you should definitely stick around for. Alex, I'll flip it to you. Your top pivot, your top fade and your top pivot of the week. My favorite part of every show.
Okay, so I think my top fade might be that expensive range of running back on DraftKings, where obviously McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara, they're fantastic players. Now that I'm thinking through this, this is pretty bold, but I feel like with McCaffrey at 9,500, he'll have to get 2.4x that to make value. So that would be 23 points. That's a pretty high mark, and I think there is some uncertainty with him kind of being injured most of last year. Are they going to give him quite as big a workload? So I think if you assume that he's doing exactly the same thing as last year, it's a fair price, but I think that you can do a lot better with more balanced build.
Okay. Spags, what do you got?
For my fade, I think it would be Kyle Pitts. And I like Kyle Pitts a lot. Like I'm not a game tape guy, but I watched so much Kyle Pitts tape because I was like, this dude is something else. And I think he's going to be great. But I do think the hype has now gotten to a point where Bill Simmons talked in this podcast, like the worst outcome for Kyle Pitts is going to be being Travis Kelce. Like, look, I think he's really good too, but there's a lot of things that have
crazy.
Yeah, but look, Bill Simmons is on one now. He's just throwing him out there with no rhyme or reason. But kudos to him. That's where we all want to be. But I would say for Kyle Pitts, like I just think 20% ownership plus, like he's going to be more expensive as the season goes on. So I do get the logic. That's the kind of play to me that like, yeah, it won't kill you in GPPs, but I would be kind of surprised if the Millie Maker winner did have Kyle Pitts there. I think either somebody cheaper kind of gets to where Pitts is going to be in terms of that final outcome in terms of his fantasy points, or, just Travis Kelce breaks the slate and puts up 35 and that's sort of it. But I think Kyle Pitts is great. It's just like the people love the shiny new toy and now they get it at tight end. So it's sort of the combination of factors there. And I think at a certain point, it's like, you just have to look at, there's a lot of tight ends on the slate, including guys at 2,500 who are going to be getting run like Tyler Kroft. And I think you could probably better off going there.
I like it. I'll close it out with just some punt fades and a pivot. I'm not saying I don't think Elijah Moore at minimum salary is not a good play, or that, Rondell Moore in that game can't be a decent play, but we have no idea what the pass catching core is going to look like there with so many options outside of DeAndre Hopkins that are just unknown at this point. We know who they are, but we don't know their involvement. What about pivoting off of that, going up a few $100s to somebody like Paris Campbell? The guy has been hurt a lot, right? He's only played 9 games in 2 seasons. But when you look at this offense, T.Y. Hilton's out. It's Michael Pittman Jr. and it's Paris Campbell, assuming he's healthy. Who else really are you going to be worried about on this team that can take away, a significant amount of opportunities? Carson Wentz has been known to target his slot receivers very often. So unless somebody like Zach Pascal is super concerning to you, I think Paris Campbell at 2% in large field tournaments makes for a great pivot off of some of these uber chalky close to minimum salary plays. So that'll do it for us. As always, this has been a blast, guys. Alex, you can find him at Awesemo DFS. All of the tools we have, everything at awesemo.com. Use the promo code DAX, $1, awesemo.com/promos. Get you that express pass for $1 to start off your trial at Awesemo. And follow Spags at Chris Spags. Check out everything now that he's the VP over at Edge Sports and the Splash Play podcast with Pete. So this has been great. Spags, always a pleasure, man.
Yeah, I just want to say real fast because I didn't get to say my formal goodbyes. Thanks to Loughy. Thanks, Alex, for having me on here. Hopefully I could do it again at some point this season. But thanks everybody behind the scenes at Awesemo, all the hosts that I miss so much. I saw Eric in chat, Josh, obviously my brother in arms, Greg. I miss all these guys very much. EMAC coming up next. Aton, great guys as well. So I hope to see you guys again soon. But you are in great hands here with the Awesemo crew heading into the season. More and more channels by the day, more and more content. It is a fantastic place to be, and I'm excited to be here to be watching it like the rest of you guys.
Alex, anything else? We are actually late, but if you want to close us out, go for it. We got to go.
Yeah, just guys, thanks for tuning in. And week 1 is a very exciting time. Good luck. Hopefully we can get some big takedowns this week.
Also, 14 likes to 100. Please, come on. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, the shame, the disrespect being thrown my way as if I didn't take the entire summer off masturbating vigorously every day while you guys do shows.
We'll catch you back here for the next one, guys. Good luck tomorrow, and we'll be here 4 hours leading up until lock, so we'll see you then. Peace.